So the title of the talk tonight is Sahul, Paradise for Birds. It's a little bit of a play on words because birds of paradise are mostly found in this area. Well, no, I'm just going to go ahead with this. So we're going to start out with a little bit of geology so you know where we are, where we're talking about, and how where we're talking about got to where it is. In order to get to New Guinea, which is kind of the center of this talk, you almost have to go through Australia. And I figured if I'm going to go through Australia, I better stop and see an Australian bird or two. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time just seeing a bird or two there. And then I'll take you through New Guinea, through Papua New Guinea, and we'll look at some of the birds and some of the places we stayed at. I'll switch over then more to taxonomy and groups of birds and which groups of birds are in New Guinea and we saw, so spend a little more time on that, and finally finish up with the people of New Guinea. So here's where we start 180 million years ago. And we're going to slowly work our way forward. No, we're not. 180 million years ago, there was a big continent called Gondwana. And Gondwana fell apart. And it fell apart into South America and Africa and the Australian area and India and so forth. And this chart here shows Gondwana breaking apart. So about 80 million years ago, it began to fragment. And about 40 million years ago, Antarctica and Australia were left together. And that landmass is kind of important to our story because that's where a lot of avian life began. For example, passerines evolved, I put 50 million years ago. I think it's closer to 30 million years ago in this area of the world at that time. So here is the area that's called Sahul, and it's a geographer's name, and it refers to the landmass which includes New Guinea and Australia and Tasmania. You can see kind of a grayish area here. When the sea level is low, this gray area is exposed as land. And so you can imagine then, if the sea level drops down that low, there's an easy pathway for creatures from Australia to New Guinea up here. And when the sea level is high, then New Guinea is isolated. So today, New Guinea is an island. It's the second largest island in the world after Greenland, so it's a big island. And it's separated by a shallow sea between it and Australia. So New Guinea was created by two different plates kind of rubbing up against one another, one being the Pacific plate up here, and the other being the Australian plate. And the Australian plate scraped the sea bottom up and made a ridge, and the ridge turned into New Guinea. And that only happened somewhere between 5 and 12 million years ago. So New Guinea hasn't been there that long. Even more recently, the last time that this shelf was exposed was only 18,000 years ago. So birds from Australia could move easily to New Guinea as recently as about 18,000 years ago. And a lot of birds don't like to travel over water, partly because water is colder, and so the air currents drop down, and so you have to work harder to fly over water, and you can't, if you're a passerine, you can't land on water. So it acts as an isolating a barrier to birds from Australia when the sea level is high. This is a chart that shows the sea level from 24,000 years ago to today. And this axis, the vertical axis here, shows the sea level in meters. So 18,000 years ago, when that shelf was exposed, the sea level was more than 120 meters lower than it is today, 120 meters. So that means that sea level in 18 or 20,000 years has risen almost 400 feet. You can see that since 8,000 years ago, the sea level has been pretty constant, but now with warming happening and the sea level rising again, we're concerned about the sea level rising a few feet. But just think what it was like to rise 400 feet. So well, anyway, that's 18,000 years ago then. Birds were readily traveling between New Guinea and Australia. Here's a map of New Guinea. And New Guinea is divided into two different political areas. There's a line that goes almost down the middle with a little bump here. And this side of the line is Papua New Guinea. It's a, well, it's where I traveled. This part of the island of New Guinea is called West Papua, and it's part of, today is part of Indonesia. It was a Dutch colony, and it's still kind of changing as far as politics go. I think kind of striving for independence from Indonesia. It has historically been a bit difficult to travel in this part, in the western part of the island. So I was happy to try to travel in the easier part. And I'll tell you, it's not a particular easy place to travel. It rains a lot. Trails are often steep and very slippery, and I worked hard. So you can see there's a mountain range down the center of the island, and in the western part of the island, this is perpetual snow on the mountaintops here in these snow mountains. So, okay, so I want to start out by going to Australia. And I want to do that because pretty much the only way to get here to Papua New Guinea is to fly from someplace like Brisbane or Sydney to get there. Although you can fly from Singapore, I think, also. But I chose to fly from Brisbane, partly because in Brisbane there is a really nice birding lodge that one can stay at. And I chose to stay there a while. So here we are in Australia, and I figured I'd start out with Australia's biggest bird because there there are two species of cassowaries. There's one in Australia and there's one in New Guinea. And unfortunately, I've only seen the one in Australia. So that's the only one I can share with you. This particular bird, I was standing next to a building photographing some smaller birds that had come in for a little bit of a feast of rice that the homeowner had scattered in the backyard. And I felt something to my right. And I turned around and looked to see, and it was a cassowary at my eye level, looking at me. And we stared at one another for a little bit. I being a bit concerned because there are stories about people being badly hurt by cassowaries, but it went off and ate rice. So from Brisbane, I started up a single lane road in a rental car, driving on the wrong side of the road. And the single lane road was occasionally paved and occasionally dirt. And I was headed for this lodge. And along the way, I managed to find a few birds. This is a member of the plover family, the masked lapwing. A number of birds you'll see have this bare skin on their faces that's kind of interesting looking, and I don't actually know why that is, that that the bare skin shows up.
We've done this before and it came through but now it is not anymore. So it's now unmuted.
I don't know if yeah, maybe I can. There. Here's another Australian bird. It's called a wood duck. It has no resemblance to our wood duck at all.
Unmuted.
I'm sorry, but I'd like to mute everybody. So that's why I just turned you off. So this is Australian wood duck, and it doesn't nest in trees, to my knowledge. It's kind of a different bird totally, but interesting looking. And here's a Pacific black duck, which is also an Australian duck. By the time I got to this lodge, O'Reilly's Lodge near Brisbane, I've been flying for I don't know how long, and then driving for a while. So I was thinking maybe I'll just take a nap. But how can you take a nap when you've got birds like this to look at? So somebody handed me a seed bowl, and these parrots have immediately zoomed in to enjoy the feast. Here's a view of the crimson rosella, an Australian parrot. And here's the Australian king parrot. This is a female, so the king parrots are male and female are different plumaged. So the female has a green head and red on the stomach, and here's the male with all red head. They're big birds, as you could see from me holding the pan, and quite impressive looking. So for most of the pictures that you see, I've put the name of the family that this bird belongs to, and then the name of the bird. If you've heard me talk before, you know that I'm somewhat fascinated by bird families, and so I was keeping an eye out for new families to see in Australia and New Guinea. Here's another relative of the parrots, but it belongs to the Cockatoo family. As I drove into the parking lot, this bird flew over noisily, I might add, and I managed to get a picture of it as it went by. The yellow-tailed black cockatoo. There are several different kinds of black cockatoos in Australia, and most of them are endangered. This one is not. There's a little trail that goes out from the lodge, and it has a nice boardwalk, and you can walk along it. And the birds are used to seeing people walk along this boardwalk early in the morning with a guide, one of the lodge people, who feeds them peanuts or raisins. And so the birds come in to see if a person is walking by. They kind of are friendly. This is a tiny little bird. It's about the size of our kinglet, and it's called a eastern yellow robin. Belongs to the family of Australasian robins. And here is another little bird seen from this trail, a white-browed scrub robin. But even though it's called a robin, it belongs to the flycatcher family, the old world flycatcher family. So I figured I'd better get on my way to New Guinea. And so I walked across this bridge, but when I got to the other side, I was still in Australia. To get to New Guinea, I had to drive back down that road again and back to the airport. And I got to the airport, and I'm showing you this because it's exemplary of what life is like in New Guinea. Here you see Port Moresby, the capital of Papua New Guinea. And all these other flights, you see boarding soon, final call, or maybe delayed. But Port Moresby flight says it's estimated. It's estimated at 9:35. I found out it was estimated as to whether there was a flight. And it finally left at noon. But it did leave and took me to Papua New Guinea. And I was really pleased to get there. So a few words about the birds in New Guinea. There are over 500 species of breeding birds there. And according to the reference down here, Phil Gregory's really nice book of the birds of New Guinea, which was relatively recently published, there are now thought to be, because some of the families have been split a bit, 7 endemic families in New Guinea. So islands are often homes to endemism. Birds travel from mainland areas like Australia, and they get to New Guinea when the sea level is right. Sea level rises, they get isolated in the island, and then they evolve separately from the birds on the mainland. And given enough time, they evolve quite a ways away from the mainland birds. So in addition to 7 families, there are a lot of endemic species, meaning only found on the island of New Guinea. And among these endemic species are the birds of paradise. So almost all the birds of paradise are found just on Papua New Guinea, or on New Guinea. I shouldn't have said PNG, it's just on New Guinea. So we landed in Port Moresby and spent some time around Port Moresby. There's a national park down here that we went to, and there's, well, I'll show you on the next slide a little bit more. When we left Port Moresby, we flew up to the very west of Papua New Guinea, in the foothills of the mountain range. And we traveled up to a mining town of Tabubil. And then we came back down and we flew over to Mount Hagen, which is in the mountains. The town of Mount Hagen is about 6,000 feet. Mount Hagen itself is about, I think it's 12 or 14,000 feet. And so it provides a habitat that's different, of course, from the lowland areas down here. And then we flew back down to Port Moresby. So this, for folks that have been there or are interested in going there, here are a few names of lodges where we stayed. So we stayed in Port Moresby at a place called the Rain Tree Lodge. And not to put down PNG, but the Rain Tree Lodge was surrounded by steel barriers to protect the people inside. There were two guards outside, two armed guards outside. Some of us got there a day early, and so we talked the guards into walking us out of the compound and down the street because we wanted to see a bird or two. And so they finally did that. But when we drove out or in, they opened the gates, let us in, and then closed the gates again. The reason for all this is that there's a fair amount of crime in the cities. And we actually ended up staying up here. You can see Rondon Ridge Lodge. We stayed at near Mount Hagen. There is another lodge that's quite famous called Ambua. And we originally were going to stay there. And I was looking forward to it because the photography is often very good there. But there was an uprising because the head of the country had thrown out the governor of the township where Ambua is. And the locals had broken the arm of the owner of the lodge, and the lodge had closed, and they burned the airplane that flies in. So stuff happens. And we were told when we were planning this trip to be flexible. And so we were. And the Rondon Ridge Lodge is a very elegant lodge, and didn't mind staying there. And it turned out the Kumo Lodge is a wonderful place for photography. You'll see in a minute. So anyway, we stayed, we visited the Pacific Adventist University near Port Moresby for birding, and we went to the Verarata National Park. And then up here in Kayunga, we went to a couple of kind of birding hotspots, and we took a boat trip down the Kitu River to a lodge called the Kwatu Lodge. And up here in Tavubil is where the mine is. We stayed at Cloudlands. So that's the story on where we stayed. So let's look at a few birds. This is at Pacific Adventist University, which was in our first day of the trip. And the tour, incidentally, was a rock jumper tour. Rock jumper does a lot of tours to Papua New Guinea. So these are whistling ducks, different whistling ducks than I'd seen before. There's a fair amount of water on the university grounds, and so we got to see a number of different water-associated birds. This looks very familiar. It's called a Nankine night heron, but it looks a lot like ours. Here's a jacana. This is an immature jacana, comb-crested, or they're called lily trotters. I love their big feet, and they really do walk across the lily pads like that. There were several different raptors overhead, some kites. The black kite is a real scavenger, and you can see it all over Asia. I've seen it in Japan and a number of different places. So it's a pretty common bird. And the Brahminy kite is not uncommon. Fruit doves, there are a number of different species of fruit dove in Papua New Guinea, and getting close to a fruit dove was nigh unto impossible because they are fiercely hunted. They're good to eat. And this was about a half a mile away, this picture, and it's been treated with various sharpening devices and everything else to be able to show you something of a fruit dove. They're very pretty. There are a number of different colors of fruit doves, and this happens to be orange fronted, but we saw a number, but photographically they were really tough. This probably looks familiar, especially if you've been to Florida. It's very similar to our what is it, purple gallinule. And I think actually there are some swamp hens now in Florida, so it wasn't too unbelievable to see. This bird is not a very exciting looking bird unless you're interested in bird families. And as I mentioned, I am. So here we were in Verorata National Park, and very near to the parking lot where our vehicle pulled in, there were some berry peckers, black berry peckers working in the bushes. So while the group went off on a walk through the jungle, I stayed to try to photograph these. It was raining, and the bird was mostly in the bush, so this is the best I did. But it was my first picture and first sighting of the berry pecker family. So I was excited. We also saw flower peckers. I'd seen them previously in other countries, but it was nice to see one here. This is red-capped flower pecker, and you can see it was raining. So rain was often an accompaniment to the trip. We saw earlier an Australasian robin, and this one is called a flycatcher, the lemon-bellied flycatcher. It's in that same family, the robin family. In Papua New Guinea, there are a lot of kingfishers, and a kookaburra is a kind of a kingfisher. And so this is a blue-winged kookaburra. They're very vocal. The laughing kookaburra, of course, is the one that everybody knows with all his incredible cackling sounds. This one also is loud. Here's a yellow-billed kingfisher, another kingfisher in the family. It's not a very common bird. It's found in the very northeast of Australia and then in New Guinea. The forest kingfisher, the sacred kingfisher, little paradise kingfisher. This is a tiny kingfisher. It's about the size of white-crowned sparrow, I guess. So not very big at all. And again, it was raining, but we managed a moment when I guess it had stopped raining, or was less anyway, and could see through the leaves to this little guy. This area here is in Tabubil. That's the mining area. This is a water pipeline that's moving water from the mountains down to the ore processing area of the mine. And so we were up here looking for birds. And as you can see, it alternated between dense fog and rain. And so again, photography was tough, but the birds that we saw in here were very special. I mean, there were quite a few different only found in the forests in New Guinea, and so it was worth being here. But I was a little unhappy about my ability to photograph things. You'll see a few. This one came out okay, a rufous-bellied kingfisher, one more kingfisher. The language in Papua New Guinea is a mixture of English and other stuff. And you can see here a public notice here's the public notice. And so you can almost read the local language. Here he's putting things in the rubbish bin. So this was the mining company trying to encourage cleanliness, and I just thought it was kind of curious. Another parrot is this Lorry. It's a forest parrot, big build, and it was pretty far up in the tree eating fruit. And nice to see. This parrot is called Pesquet's parrot, and it's almost black with some orange on it. Again, it was raining, so hence maybe I'm blaming the sharpness on the rain. But this parrot, its closest relative is two black parrots that are found in Madagascar. And some people think that this is its own family. It's not related to anything else. So as a collector of families, I've put it in the bank for when they separate it. So I said we took a boat trip. It wasn't raining. And that was really nice, because if it had been, it would have been uncomfortable. But it was a beautiful day, and we went up this almost glassy, the Fly River, for several hours until we got, and we saw some interesting birds on the way. This is hornbill. Hornbills are a little bit in trouble now because they're being hunted for their horn, which is treated as a medicinal powder by some cultures. Since rhinoceros horn is so hard to get now, this is becoming a substitute. And there is a hornbill called the rhinoceros hornbill that has a really big horn and is very seriously endangered. And some in New Guinea, the hornbills are in trouble, but they're not as much trouble as in some other areas. These are big birds. So this is about 2 feet long. So here we are at our lodge after we've taken the boat trip. This is the Kwatu Lodge. So land ownership in Papua New Guinea rests with villages and families. And it's very difficult for central government to impose their will as far as land goes. So when you travel, your guide makes sure that the village that you're going to accepts that you're coming. And this is a village lodge that the villagers built, and I was staying here. And we'd go in, we'd take our boots off here. The leeches were mostly here. So you take your boots off and then walk in. So you try to keep it a little bit clean. Things were wet and muddy. And a lot of the group took off here to take another bird walk. I stayed back because it looked like rain, and it really did. It poured. And I didn't want to get my camera gear too soaking. Here's another lodge that we stayed at called the Kumo Lodge, which is near is in the mountains, and it's also a native constructed lodge. But it was beautiful. It was really nicely done. The food was excellent, and the photography here was good. It was good. Well, here's an example, another one of these Australasian robins, and you had a chance to kind of stand on a balcony sheltered from the rain and photograph birds that were coming to a feeding station. And this big feeder tray, they put fruit out on the tray and the birds would come into it. And it was a real treat photographically. This is a lovely bird called a tiger parrot. This is just to show the grassbird family. I didn't get a very nice picture of it. We took a little tour from the Kumo Lodge and found some other families of birds. There was a falcon. On the right here is a frogmouth. Really weird birds. They're related to nighthawks and they're in the goatsucker realm. You can see this is the beak. So they've got a huge big beak, and well, there they are. They're very camouflaged, and this again is a big bird. It's the size of a chicken. Here's the Rondon Ridge Lodge, the place I said we stayed at when we couldn't go to Ambua. And you can see it's quite a nice place. The same man owns this, owns Ambua, but the photography wasn't as good here. We took a hike up a mountain trail that was really slippery. It was kind of red clay, and being an old guy, getting up to the top of that was quite a challenge. I made it, and fortunately, I had a little stool that I had with me when I got to the top. I could sit down and catch my breath. So that's kind of the traveling around we did. Now, a bit of taxonomy here. The passerine birds, so all the perching birds, the songbirds that we have, and the flycatchers and so forth, all belong to the passeriform order. And this order of birds originated in Australia. And this chart kind of shows where different branchings in the evolution of birds happened. And this circle here around this red square, the red square says that happened in Australia. So this whole group of birds here branched off in Australia, and these are the sub-Ossine and Ossine songbirds. And then they split apart later on into different families. And this, please don't be scared by this. I just wanted to show you all these different things, these different lines are different families of birds splitting out, and they're all in that passerine group. And there's 3 different main branches of these passerines. And here the green squares the green is Australia. And so all these splits happened in Australia. And they started to happen when Wallacea, the islands in Indonesia, began to rise up. And it gave places for birds to move to and then be isolated in and evolve separately from other birds. So it encouraged this kind of splitting to go on. New Guinea didn't rise up until here about 15 million years ago or so, and actually even more recently than that. So there are 3 different groups of these passerines. One is called the Basal Ossines, one is called the Corvides, and one is called the Passeroides. And you can see the Basal Ossines and the Corvides all are still in these red squares, which is New Guinea. So what happened? There was this radiation with the uplift of Wallacea, and then Australia began to dry out. and as it dried out, the birds that formerly were in forests sought forested area, and they were pushed over to New Guinea, which was reachable at the time by a low sea level. And today, those birds that are in New Guinea are residual birds from the evolution that happened in Australia and Wallachia. So it's not that they evolved in New Guinea, but they remain in New Guinea. And so all the red squares are New Guinea birds. So I want to talk about these Basal Ossines and the Corvides particularly. And these are the families of birds that are in the Basal Ossine family. And they're found in Australia and New Guinea. The green ones are found in New Guinea. None of them are endemic to New Guinea, none of these families. So they're in both Australia and New Guinea, but you can find them in New Guinea. So the ones in green here are found in both Australia and New Guinea. And you'll see that Bauer Birds are one of the families that are in this group. And they're kind of particularly unique birds. So I'll spend a little time on that. This is an Australian Babbler. It's in this group of birds. It's in the Australian Babbler family. And I actually saw it in Australia, not in New Guinea. It's not a very big family. There are a few species in it. And it's about the size of our thrasher. And it doesn't look too different from it. This is a tree creeper, Australian tree creeper. There are 7 different species found in both land areas. This is a fairy wren, the male on the bottom, the female on the top. Many of them are dramatically, strikingly colored with this iridescent blue, and some of them are red and whatever. They're very pretty little birds, and they're tiny little birds. They're wren size. But they belong to a different family than our wrens. Here's another Australasian wren, a black and white one. So the Bowerbirds are found mostly in New Guinea, and this one here is in Australia, the regent Bauer bird. And the male and female are differently colored. Bauer birds are called Bauer birds because they build not a nest, but a courtship area. And the male builds this thing, and I'll show you one. This is one of the simplest of Bauer birds. So its bower, its courtship area, is a bunch of leaves that are turned over. So you see white or pale leaves on the ground here, and the Bauer bird itself sits on a branch up above here, and it sings a really raucous song, and for some reason that attracts females. So this is kind of the way Bowers started, was to show that this is where the male is, I guess. And they have developed then in more evolved Bowerbirds. This is a fawn-breasted Bowerbird. It's found in both Australia and New Guinea. And this bower that's constructed is designed in such a way, it's got little decorations. You can see little green berries put into it. So bowers are often decorated in some way. Sometimes the front area is decorated, sometimes the bower itself. And the more advanced bowers are constructed like this. The female comes into the bower from the back, the male is dancing in front, and so she comes in to watch the dance. She is protected from the side by the bower. So if the male wants to mate, the male has to come around behind to approach the female, and the female can walk away if she's not interested. The female won't select a bower that's not well built, that protects her well. So although it's not necessarily to the advantage of the male to build a safety zone for her, she won't come unless it's designed like that. So they've evolved, instead of the bird evolving fancy decorations, fancy feathers or something like that, it's evolved this behavior of designing these bowers. And the bird that builds the best bower, wow, bird best bower, kind of wins the game. Here's another, this is the satin bower bird. It's a blue-black bird with bright blue eye, and it decorates its area with these blue plastic decorations. Now, when it evolved this whole game here, it couldn't get blue plastic. It was blueberries that it collected, but it thinks it desires blue, and it can find a lot of blue stuff like this. So there you are. Okay, here's another kind of unique family member found in both New Guinea and Australia, called the log runner. There are only 2 members of the family, and this is one. And then honey eaters are found in both areas. They're part of this group. So you can see there's 191 or maybe more species of honey eaters. So they really radiated, and they are sugar-eating birds. And there are lots of flowers in Australia and New Guinea. So that's partly why they have spread so much. Here's another honey eater, spinebill. And here's a honey eater that's in Papua New Guinea. This has this bare skin again on the face, and it can change color when it's agitated or interested in a mate, or it wasn't exactly clear when, but they call it blushing, and they do indeed blush. The Smoky honey eater. This is another honey eater in New Guinea. And this is a big honey eater. It's more than a foot long, called a melodectes. They come to the fruit on that feeding tray. Here's a brightly colored one. This one was in Australia, Myzamela, and here's in the same group in New Guinea. Okay, so that's that group of birds. Now here's the Corvid group. Here's a whole list of different families of birds that are found in that family, and the ones in red are just found in New Guinea. So things like the wattled plowbill is a family of birds that's only found in New Guinea. The painted berry peckers only there. The red and green are New Guinea and Australia, but the mottled whistler, the Ifrita, and so forth, only in New Guinea. So I was pretty excited to see this bird. You can see that it was raining. It was very dark. It was in the jungle. But this little bird came in. It's about the size of a kinglet. And there's only one bird in the whole family, the wattled plowbill, and it has these wattles. And well, there it is. And boy, was I excited to get an actual picture of it. The berry peckers, the painted berry peckers, there are 2 species. And at that feeding tray a pair of these birds came in and they started to preen one another. And this crest in front is kind of erectile and came up, and oh, it was pretty cool to watch. And I got so sidetracked with watching it that I forgot to take a picture until one of them left. So sorry, there's only one bird there, but it's a striking bird, the berry pecker. The whistlers, this is a female regent whistler, and here's the male. Butcher birds are found in both areas, Australia and New Guinea, and it's a big group, and they're big birds, and they're tough, nasty birds. The Australian magpie belongs to this family, and I have personally been knocked flat on the ground by an Australian magpie. So, and these are big. This is as big as a raven here, and big bill and so forth. So the butcher birds. And why butcher birds and wood swallows belong in the same family is beyond me. So here's a butcher bird and here's a wood swallow, but they're in the same family. It was very foggy here. This was taken in Tabubil, that mining area. So hard to see. Bell birds, there are only 3 species of bell bird. This is one. They stay mostly on the ground. Quip birds give a sound like a cracking whip. I mean, really like a cracking whip. And it'll make you jump if you don't. It's loud, and I don't know how they do it, but they do it. They're generally very timid, but this was on that boardwalk where they come in to get a raisin or something. And so this bird came in hoping I had raisins. This is a very interesting bird, the Ifrit. It belongs to the Ifrita family. It's the only member of that family, and it's poisonous. And it was, I think it was the first poisonous bird discovered, and it was discovered for science by Jack Dumbacher, who's head of the Department of Birds and Mammals at the California Academy of Science. So, so I thought that was pretty cool because I know Jack and now I know his bird. And this one, it's chickadee sized. So it's a neat little bird. They discovered it was poisonous because they were misnetting them, and then the bird would peck at their fingers, and then they'd suck their finger, and then their lips and their tongue would go numb. Another little tiny bird, the Sitella, 2 species, its own family. So this is a view from a small little village, a farming village, where there is a lek of lesser birds of paradise. And the trees have been harvested pretty much where the lek was until there's 1 tree left. And I think there's 1 male left. And we were lucky enough, it's on the right here, the lesser bird of paradise, to see this bird of paradise come in and display, and the female came in, and they mated. And so even though there were only 2 of them, we got to see the whole show. And here's a Rajiana bird of paradise down near in the Varirata National Park. There was a big lek of these birds. There were probably 15 birds, and they're very vocal, and they display all these feathers, and they flip upside down, and the feathers come over their heads, and it's a big show. So it's exciting to see the birds of paradise, and they've evolved in many different pathways, kind of. We stopped up in the mountains to see another bird of paradise, and we got out of our van, and the entire village emptied out to come and see what was going on. Look at those funny looking guys that are looking with those, what's going on here? And so we showed them the pictures and the field guides and took their picture, and they were all reasonably friendly. And this is the bird we were trying to see. And this is with my telephoto lens, as close as I could get. And then I blew the picture up a little bit so you could see this is a superb bird of paradise. And it has this big blue bib, kind of. They're hunted, and so they're timid and hard to see. But we were lucky to see it. This is a brown sicklebill. It came in to a feeder, and it's also a bird of paradise. Well, striking bird with big long tail and decurved bill. Here's a ribbon-tailed Astrapia. You can see its tail running down and off the frame here. And the feather decorations on this bird, I thought, were just amazing. It had all these different feathers and whatever, was quite striking. So it was neat we saw about 12 or 14 different birds of paradise, and I got to photograph, some of them. This is the Astrapia again, the male and the female. This is the King of Saxony bird of paradise, and instead of having tail feathers, it has head feathers that come out and come down. So each of these different species evolved different kinds of decorations. And then there are some birds of paradise, not very many, like this Paradigala, that instead of being a lekking bird, where one male essentially mates with the whole group of females, in the Paradigala, they pair up one male and female for life. So it's not a very decorated. The male and female look alike. He doesn't have big long tail feathers. He doesn't have head feathers or anything. So it's a whole different mating procedure with this particular bird of paradise, but most of them are lekking birds. And finally, just a few words about the locals. So Papua New Guinea has been inhabited for 40,000 years or so long time. There's evidence that they've been farming the highlands for a long time, 10,000 years or so. So people have been on the island of New Guinea forever. It was only discovered by Western man in 1938 when Richard Archbold flew over these agricultural plots and said, hey, what's going on there? But the thing that particularly interests me about this is the population is large, and there are over 1,000 languages. So think about the fact that there are 1,000 languages. The formation of languages is very much like the formation of bird species. The species get isolated in river valleys or mountaintops or whatever, just like these tribes did. And they evolved their own languages, and so it's a similar kind of thing. These guys, the Huli Wigmen, did a little dance for us, and their feathers, we looked at their feathers and looked at field guides, and I think we found 23 different species of mostly birds of paradise and some other birds that they had put together in this display. And they guard this top knot thing and all very carefully. It's protected, and it's because it's very difficult to get all these things. And they're honored by the tribe as being skillful people who know how to do the dance. There's another group that we went to visit called the Mudmen. And the Mudmen wear these, they put these on for dances, these clay helmets, which are heavy. And the story is that it goes way back. They were a happy tribe living in a place, and they're small statured people, and big people came. And the big people came and they drove the men away, and they captured the women and the farms, and they were without their homes. And so they made these mud helmet things, and they got these long fingers and bows and arrows. And after some time, they stormed back into the village and drove off the big people. And so they still celebrate that success, and they showed us that. So it's not everybody that looks like these tribes, and of course there are pretty good sized cities in parts of Papua New Guinea, but 80 to 90% of Papua New Guinea is still forest. And so I want to say thanks to the people of New Guinea for preserving a wonderful island, and to you for listening, and Rock Jumper and our guides. And that's my story, and thank you. So